Well, look, Morgan will hit the nail on the head, and I've been saying this ever since I came out of government in the autumn. The Labour Party was elected without a plan for government. In fact, one of the first things I had to do when I went to Downing Street was work with the policy unit and some key cabinet ministers to write one, and we published it as the Plan for Change back in December.
So the Makerfield MP and the man likely to be our next Prime Minister has said he will take his responsibilities seriously and fund the defence investment plan released earlier this week. So this was his first interview since winning Makerfield, and the would-be Prime Minister told Marr that he would not be raising VAT, income tax or national insurance, but there's flexibility for other taxes to rise. Let's discuss this with James Lyons, a former Director of Comms for Sir Keir Starmer. James, welcome to the programme.
Good evening, Henry. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's really good to have your brain on this tonight because we've been waiting for Andy Burnham to speak since he made his declaration up in Manchester. He's broken cover. He's done this interview.
If I was still on the Sunday Times, I'd say he's broken his silence.
Yes, indeed. He's broken his silence. That's right. But I'm just kind of considering him as a creature emerging from the undergrowth. Let's keep the metaphors going. People are leaping on his pledge to maintain Labour's or stick to Labour's 2024 general election manifesto and Chancellor Reeves' fiscal rules. And he's also expressed frustration with those who feel he's wobbly on economics. I mean, how convinced were you by what he said?
Well, having had a hand in writing the manifesto, he's absolutely right. It does contain some room for tax rises. Not any of the big ones that would get you the money. You've just run through the list there. And I think what he's tried to do there is identify a tax rise that at least initially sounds relatively attractive to people. So taxes on out-of-town warehouses to try and reinvigorate the high street, which we know is the deterioration of our high streets is a big concern to many people up and down the country.
I'm just looking at another line here from Stephen Swinford and Geraldine Scott's piece. Economists have said it is likely that Burnham will have to raise taxes to increase public spending given the state of the public finances. He has committed himself to the biggest increase in council house building since the post-war period. I mean, they say you campaign in poetry, govern in prose. How does that sound?
Well, look, the PM presumptive, if we can call him that, has signalled all sorts of spending priorities. So I think, he's long looked at transport infrastructure outside of capital cities as a way to spread growth and spread prosperity. You've spoken there about the kind of council housing. He's also talked about, of course, reform of social care, which could prove very costly indeed. And that comes on top of all of the kind of usual pressures that we have, an ageing population, growing demand on the NHS. And as you say, defence spending. He has said that he will honour the defence investment plan in full tonight. The issue is that's just a down payment on what we're being asked to stump up in return for membership of NATO.
Yeah, he also said he wasn't in all of the discussions regarding the dip, as they call it, and it's left him with a £4.7 billion black hole to fill if and when he becomes PM. And some commentators are saying your former boss gave him a hospital pass by leaving him this hole. What do you think? I mean, was that an act of spite by Starmer?
Well, look, I think, the Treasury will tell you that this is, often the case and that you allocate funding at budgets. But I can understand why Andy Burnham feel a bit raw about this. The fact is that £5 billion is peanuts, frankly. The government spends £1.2 trillion every year. And actually, the way in which the fiscal rules work, and Andy Burnham has said he's going to keep the fiscal rules from this regime, twice every year you have to make sure that you've somehow balanced the books over the kind of medium term. It's rather like landing a jumbo jet on a postage stamp. And I remember from my time in Downing Street, we went a month out from the spring statement, we had a 20 billion shortfall, and that then fell to about 8 billion in the end. So it could be that this 5 billion just gets magically wiped out by change in economic forecasts. Of course, the reverse can also be true, and he could end up having to find an awful lot more than that.
Can you understand why Burnham is irritated by people who question his grip on economics? I mean, how fair is it of people to say, well, you didn't answer the questions about Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules. You kind of said, well, I'm not going to do an exam on this right now, live on the radio or whatever. Are you convinced now?
Well, Andy was the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. That was his first job in Cabinet many moons ago. So he is used to being the Chancellor's enforcer and imposing fiscal discipline on departments. We have seen one of his economic advisors, Jim O'Neill, an economist, talking about increasing borrowing to invest and saying that.
And also not introducing a wealth tax, I think he said, didn't he?
That has also been mooted. I mean, a wealth tax covers a multitude of sins or delights if you're in certain parts of the Labour Party. There's all sorts of things you could do there around property or capital gains tax, or all sorts of things. So look, I think it is clear that Andy Burnham is going to want to spend more money than Keir Starmer was spending. I think that in part is, what this whole kind of leadership change has been about, as well, of course, of trying to find someone who is maybe more of a natural communicator.
That's right. And how far do you agree with Morgan McSweeney's comments, as in the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, his comments to the BBC's Nick Robinson today, that I think that we didn't prepare enough for what kind of world we were going to be in. Considering what McSweeney said, how concerned, James, are you that Andy Burnham might be even less well prepared, given that he probably didn't expect to be Prime Minister this early into Labour's term?
Well, look, Morgan hit the nail on the head, and I've been saying this ever since I came out of government in the autumn. The Labour Party was elected without a plan for government. In fact, one of the first things I had to do when I went to Downing Street was work with the policy unit and some key cabinet ministers to write one, and we published it as the Plan for Change back in December. And it may seem staggering to your listeners that is the case, but I think there was so much focus on winning the Labour Party back from the hard left, making it electable again, and nobody believed that Keir Starmer could win an election, never mind the huge majority that he got. So he deserves huge plaudits for that. But there is, in a sense, the kind of project ended the moment he went through that black door. And I was really struck, actually, in his resignation statement, Henry, that he said walking through the door had been the proudest moment of his life. And, it should have been something he did once he got inside.
Yeah. Understood. James, thank you very much for your candour. That's James Lyons, former Director of Comms for Sir Keir Starmer.